So I'd like to now take you through a little bit about the course. So welcome to week 1 of our online course. So today's session, we will be going through our agenda here. So we will be undertaking the next 30 minutes or so. We'll be going through a welcome, a little bit about PJIP, the Pacific Judicial Integrity Program, and an introduction to the course. We'll then move on to our presenters and undertake the first week's presentation on judicial ethics, fraud and corruption. And then we'll move to discussion question time. So we'll be moving into breakout rooms where we'll be split up, and we have about 3 questions that will be together discussing out of the content and the presentations that were delivered today. After that, we will then look to introduce next week's session and then wrap up this week, first week 1 session. Lovely. So I wanted to just provide a little bit of a background to begin with on the Pacific Judicial Integrity Program. So PJIP is funded by the Australian government, and it's being implemented and delivered in partnership between the Papua New Guinea Centre for Judicial Excellence and the Federal Court of Australia. The program works with 12 partner courts across the Pacific, and it's a 3-year program between March 2022 to April 2025. The main goal and outcomes of PJIP is to support our judicial officers, registrars, associates and court officers in presiding over, managing and reporting on fraud and corruption related cases. This is done through specialist in-person and online training courses, mentoring opportunities and networking opportunities, and resources and publications as well. So I'd now like to take the opportunity to introduce you to our PJIP online course advisor, Miss Margaret Barron, who'll take you through a little bit more about the course and will be our facilitator for today. Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks very much, Nicole, and welcome everyone, wherever you might be in the Pacific. First off, I'd like to talk to you about this brand new website that we have called the PJIP website, and you've been given a link to it. This is actually a picture of the homepage, and you'll see that the online course that we're involved in at the moment has been highlighted with the red arrow, and you can access that. I believe, Nicole, it's password protected, but people have received the login details.
That's correct, Margaret.
Okay, and so the next slide shows you, if you were to go further and click on that link and enter your password and username, it takes you to a discussion a little bit more about the course. So it goes through what the objectives of the course are, and I'm actually going to go through those in a moment, so I won't go through them now, but you'll see that it has a broad statement on the objectives of the online course, and then each week there's a detailed page in relation to the contents of the particular online session. So this week our focus is on ethics, fraud and corruption related cases, and the first part of the presentation is about the introductory matters, showing you how to use Zoom, how to access the website, and the second part is going to be presented by Joe Wilson, who is the Judicial Registrar of the Federal Court of Australia, and also by Victoria Bello, who is from the Papua New Guinea National and Supreme Courts. After the presentation, we'll generally have a discussion group, and as Nicole's mentioned, you'll be put into virtual breakout rooms on Zoom, on the PowerPoint, on the website. Ultimately, the presentation from today will be recorded and will be embedded on the website, so you can watch it back for future reference. Also, there may be some additional reading or additional resources that might assist your understanding of the particular topic that we're dealing with this week. So we've made a decision that the material will be selectively released, which means that it will only be released on the week in which it's being discussed. So next week you'll have access to week 2. The beginning of week 3, you'll have access to week 3, and likewise for week 4. We don't want you getting ahead of yourself and doing too much, but just focusing on the week that's in play. Before I introduce Joanne to speak, I just wanted to outline the objectives of this online course, and Nicole mentioned them sort of earlier. So it's a specialist training course. The idea is to increase your knowledge and skills as registrars or judicial associates or court officers who are involved in directly assisting judges to manage and report on fraud and corruption-related cases. So we've identified some specific outcomes of the course, so what you'll be able to do at the end of the course, and these are the things that you'll be able to do. You'll be able to identify and apply ethical principles to practical examples that relate to the management of fraud and corruption-related cases. You'll be able to identify and explain how fraud and corruption-related cases can be effectively managed. We'll be focusing on documents, and you'll be able to identify the documents and also evidence required for particular fraud and corruption-related cases. And also, you will develop your skills in case management. So you develop competency in case management of fraud and corruption-related cases, and you'll be able to identify and record important data regarding fraud and corruption-related cases. The other benefit of this group is that you'll be able to share and exchange experiences. And I think with everyone's permission, we'll distribute a list of participants so you can chat with one another. We're going to meet every Thursday for 4 weeks for 2 hours. So today, the 20th of July is our first session. It's the same Zoom link for each week, but we'll send you the link each week to remind you. Fraud is related and corruption-related offences is a huge area. So we're decided to focus on 2 of the 5 most prevalent fraud and corruption-related types of cases. So we're going to concentrate on fraud and bribery. And we're going to give people the opportunity to explain how your court handles these cases. Okay, so without further ado, I will call on Jo Wilson from the Federal Court to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. I missed the initial login where we were testing our microphones and things because I was stuck in court. So if you can't hear me, well, I suppose if you can hear me, smile. Ah, there we go. Now I know you can hear me. I was about to say if you can't hear me, raise your hand, then I realise that won't actually compute. It's so lovely to see all your faces. Before I start, I want to acknowledge that I'm conducting today's presentation on the land of the Wurundjeri people here in Melbourne. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and it is freezing cold here today. So I'm enjoying seeing all of your smiling faces with your summery clothes on. I think I saw someone with a flower in her hair as well. So today, starting off with ethics. Isn't that an interesting subject? Well, guess what? It actually is. So if we can have the next slide. So I think probably the thing about this topic in the work that you do is not just that this is affects, the cases that are coming in the door, but it actually applies to, your own approach to your work every day in the court system. And so what I'm going to do is today, I'm going to step you through, first of all, the difference between ethics and integrity and what the differences are and where the overlaps are. And then I'm going to talk about the framework that applies to us here in the Federal Court in Australia. So the definition, the distinction, I should say, about what the difference is between ethics and integrity. Ethics is the quality that describes a common understanding that we all have about a proper way to behave. So it's not something that's defined in terms of legislation or rules or anything of that nature. It's more intrinsic as to what we consider is appropriate behaviour. In their simplest form, ethics include qualities such as respect and trustworthiness, and they're the principles that guide our behaviour in our day-to-day life, whether we're at work or at home or out in the community. Integrity, sorry, you want to go back to the integrity slide? Thank you. I'm not controlling the slides, Margaret is. So thank you, Margaret. Integrity is the practical alignment between our ethical standards and then what we actually do in the world. So whether that's something that we're required to do as part of our job, or if it's just, you know, something that we're doing in the community. Ethics is the standard by which we conduct ourselves day to day. Integrity is the standard by which we conduct ourselves day to day. And when our integrity is compromised, it undermines confidence in our ability to do the right thing. So whether that's, you know, maybe telling a lie to your husband or you know, doing something unethical at work, if people can't trust you, then that undermines people's confidence in you. Next slide, please. So ethical standards are let me just move this, sorry. I've got something on my screen. There we go. Ethical standards are our integrity guide to how we act and make decisions. And when we act with integrity, then the community that we all work for can trust that we are working to a standard that is ethical, fair, and appropriate. And by understanding our obligations, we minimise the potential for risks to our integrity and contribute to a strong and positive culture that promotes trust in us by the community. So the community who's coming in the door every day, who we serve, they know that because we have these standards, that they can trust us with usually what is very, very difficult time in their lives. I mean, I often say people don't come to court by choice. Usually they come to court because something awful has happened to them, or maybe they've made some bad decisions, or they're engaged in a difficult dispute with someone that's been going on for a while. So the people who walk in the door are usually undergoing some fairly stressful situations. So it's really important that we act with integrity when dealing with those people. So next slide. Yes, in the federal court, we have an ethical framework that we're all bound by as employees of the Australian Public Service. And they impose on us ethical obligations that apply to all federal court employees. And they arise from a number of different documents. And I've sent through links. These are all publicly available. So I've sent through links for this information to Margaret, and it's going to be available to you all, so you can sort of have a look at it in your own time. But basically, we're bound by the Australian Public Service, or APS, Code of Conduct, the APS values, and then the APS employment principles. And so these frameworks have been designed to maintain public trust in the court and in all court officers. It enables us to make sound decisions about what we ought to do, and it underpins our integrity as employees and as a service. So the framework, which consists of the Code of Conduct and the values and the employment principles, they are set out in the Public Service Act 1999, which is it's in legislation, and it establishes the standards for professionalism and the obligations that all APS employees are required to comply with by law. And so if we start with the professional conduct, that includes things such as acting honestly, acting with care and due diligence, complying with the law, complying with lawful and reasonable directions. Oh, there we've got a new slide for it. Good. Complying with the lawful and reasonable directions of our supervisors. And also, very importantly, in the court system, maintaining confidentiality. There's a lot of information that we have access to by virtue of our position as court officers. And a lot of that is confidential and subject to privacy provisions out in the wide world, but we get it because we're in court. And so maintaining confidentiality is a really big issue in terms of integrity in this space. Next slide, please. The next big one, I think, is conflicts of interest. So that includes both real conflicts of interest and perceived conflicts of interest. So we need to take reasonable steps to avoid any conflict of interest, real or apparent, in connection with our duties. And then we need to disclose details of any material personal interest as soon as we become aware of the conflict, so that the risks can be managed. Because I think everyone sort of understands that, you know, we don't exist in a vacuum as court employees. We have our own friends and lives and families and the rest of it. And there will from time to time be situations where you might have a witness in a matter who is a personal friend, or a party in a matter who might be a family member. And so the biggest issue with conflicts of interest is not that they exist, but then what we do with them when we identify them. So making sure that we tell someone, making sure that we engage the policy in our own court about how to manage those conflicts, so that the community can have confidence that, you know, we're not doing favours on the inside for people who we might know or be related to. Something else, yeah. Good. Use of court resources. That was the next thing I was going to mention. Sort of similar to maintaining confidentiality, we need to ensure that all employees use court resources for a proper manner and for a proper purpose. So again, we have access to a lot of information by virtue of our roles, and we must not provide false or misleading information in response to official requests for information. And the flip side of that coin is that we must not improperly use inside information or our power and authority to obtain that information to obtain a benefit or advantage for someone else, or to cause detriment to either the court or to another person. So we must always make sure that anything that we do or say in our personal lives, we're not sort of invoking our position in the court as a way to sort of assert our authority over other people. So the ethical frameworks that are set out in the APS values that are set out in the Public Service Act, they provide us as court officers with the markers on what the highest standard of integrity looks like. And so those values are that we are impartial, so it means we're apolitical. We don't, as part of our role, engage in political discussion or attempt to persuade people as to one side or another of a political issue. We are committed to service, so we're professional, we're objective, we're innovative, we're efficient. We work collaboratively to achieve the best results for our community. And that is really important, I think, especially in terms of court officers, because there is a bit of a hierarchy. I know in our court, and I assume probably in your court too, where, you know, the judge is sort of at the top, and then maybe down the bottom you've got the person who's, you know, sitting on the front desk, or the security person. Each of us, in whatever role we have in our court, we have a really important function in our community, and the contribution that we make to the justice system is really important. So don't ever underestimate the value of the contribution that you're making to the system in your community. We're accountable, we're open, and we're accountable to the community and under the law. We respect all people and cultures, including their rights and their heritage. So something that we're very mindful of here in Australia is when we engage with First Nations and Aboriginal people, we want to have a culturally safe space for those people when they're appearing before the court. And that can include things such as not using certain people's names who have deceased, who have passed away, who are deceased, It might involve not using particular phrases in court because they can be triggering for Aboriginal people and First Nations people. So respect encompasses not just being respectful in our own right, but also culturally respectful and creating culturally safe spaces in our court system for people. And finally, we're ethical. We demonstrate leadership. We're trustworthy. We act with integrity in all that we do. Next slide, please. So the next part of the framework is the employment principles, and they provide that the workplaces of the court are flexible, safe and rewarding, where communication, consultation, cooperation and input from employees on matters that affect their workplaces is valued. We have workplaces that are free from discrimination, patronage and favouritism. And our workplaces recognise the diversity of our community and foster diversity in the workplace. So, beg your pardon, lost my thing. Okay. And so ethical decision making. As I said, at times we're going to be faced with difficult ethical decisions, and exercising good judgment and navigating complex issues is a key part of our roles in the justice system. So like I said before, there will be times when you know someone who's appearing before the court, or someone might ask you if you can, have access to certain information by virtue of your position in the court. And it's not so much about avoiding those dilemmas, because they will happen. It's about what we do when we are faced with an ethical dilemma. And so in the APS, we have a model called the Reflect model that helps us to unpack integrity issues and provide a roadmap for ethical reasoning. So the first thing is that we recognise whether there's a potential issue or problem, and things you might want to ask yourself. I mean, sometimes it's as easy as something just doesn't feel right. You just get a gut feeling. You think, I don't know about this. And if you have that feeling, ask yourself, do I feel this is risky? Is there something here that's not quite right? How would I maybe explain this to someone who I respect? If there's any of those issues, then you've probably got an ethical dilemma on your hands. So the next step in the process is to find the relevant information. So potentially a potential conflict of interest, maybe someone who's appearing before the court and it's a case in which you're involved. Right, what do I have to do? Where do I go? So identify the relevant legislation, guidance or policies. And sometimes it's as easy as just asking a colleague, hey, I've got this issue. What would you do? What do you know about this? Where should I go? Who should I ask? Then once you've found whatever the guidance or policy happens to be in your court, linger at the fork in the road. And what that means is just take a moment to pause and reflect and consider talking it through, as I said, with a colleague. Supervisors and managers are usually a really good source of information for things like this. And say to those people, what would you do in this situation? Have you had a situation like this? What did you do? Would you do anything differently? Once you've paused and thought about it, the next step is to evaluate your options. So think through what it is that your dilemma is. So with the person who might be appearing in a case that you're handling, it probably wouldn't look very good if you're sitting in court and they're sitting in court winking at you, would it? Things like that. Think through what possible consequences would there be here? What are the risks if I stay involved in this case? And apply the accountability test. Does the decision stand up to public scrutiny or independent review? And one of the questions that I often hear people asking here in Melbourne, at least, we have a newspaper which is a bit of a rag, you might say, and it's called the Herald Sun. And oftentimes people will refer to, how would this look on the front page of the Herald Sun? So if it's on the front page of the paper and everyone knows about it, how's it going to look for me? So that's usually a really good litmus test of, am I doing the right thing? And then be prepared to explain your reasons for your decision. So sometimes it's not so much about the decision you come to, but it's being able to explain the process that you went through to get to the decision. Because oftentimes with ethical issues, there's actually no right answer. There's no right or wrong. There's more shades of grey. And if you can show whoever it is at the end of the day that these are the steps that you went through, I spoke to my manager, I spoke to a colleague, this is the court policy, then that will then back up what your ultimate decision might happen to be. So you've done all that, you come to a decision. That's a good time to record your decision and maybe make a note or make a record of that process that you've gone through to satisfy yourself that you've made the right decision in terms of whatever the ethical dilemma might be. And then afterwards, after it's all over, that's a good time to reflect on what's happened, what the outcome was, both with yourself and with others. And that includes not just what the outcome was immediately, but then, maybe a month, 2 months later to reflect on, okay, would I have done anything different? How did it turn out for everyone? Did it work? Did it not work? And if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently? And if we could have the next slide. And now I think it's time for Victoria to take over. So we're going to have breakout rooms after Victoria's presentation. Yes. So thank you very much for all of your smiling faces and nodding while I was presenting. I must say, when I did it in Brisbane in, I think it was March, it was so much nicer being in the room with you all, but I'm really glad that we're able to connect remotely at least this time around. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jo. Yeah, so I'll call on Victoria now to start her presentation, and I'll manage the slide deck for you.
Thank you once again for having me on board to present again, Nicole and the team. Our presentation today is on corruption cases. We will consider how National Court Registry, fraud and corruption track in PNG. Okay, in PNG, in Papua New Guinea National Court Registry, under the criminal division is divided into 2 tracks, the general crimes track and the fraud and corruption track. The fraud and corruption track is a special track that manages the fraud and corruption cases. Previously, the crimes registry officers were guided by the criminal practice rules, that's 1987, in registering and managing all criminal cases. There were a lot of cases registered, so the fraud and corruption track was established through rules committee who formulated the criminal practice rules, fraud and corruption related offences rules. That was on the 4th of November 2013. The purpose of the formulation of the criminal fraud and corruption related offences rules 2013 and the establishment of the fraud and corruption track is to facilitate a quick, fair and efficient disposition of fraud and corruption cases under a special track. That is to distinguish fraud offences as opposed to other criminal offences, and can be dealt with separately in the fraud track. Since the establishment of the fraud and corruption track, the fraud and corruption cases are managed through the fraud and corruption track, and that's in Waigani. The fraud and corruption track is managed by a track leader who reports to the assistant registrar, and the assistant registrar crimes reports to the Deputy Registrar National Court, and the Deputy Registrar National Court reports to the registrar. In the provincial centers, the criminal clerk manages all the criminal matters, including fraud and corruption cases. What is done at the fraud and corruption track registry? The committal courts, district courts, after finding enough evidence to commit an accused person to stand trial at the national court, commits a person to the national court. The clerk of the committal court forwards the notice of committals, the information and other relevant documents to the fraud and corruption registry track. After receiving the notice of committal, information and other documents, the clerks will register the matters under either CRFC, that is criminal fraud, corruption related offences, and then the number is issued, the year and the number. For normal fraud and corruption cases, that is the case code that we use, which is CRFC in bracket there, you can see. Oh. Also for special applications under originating summonses of fraud and corruption related matters, also is registered and given a number, and also the year is also allocated with the number. And appeals and reviews from the district court will be also registered as criminal appeals, fraud and corruption, and the year as well. After registering the case will be listed before judge for mention, direction, and other listings until the matter goes for trial and the court makes a decision on the verdict and later sentence if the person is found guilty. Types of the offences dealt with under the criminal practice of fraud and corruption rules 2013. The types of fraud and corruption that the criminal practice of fraud and corruption related offences 2013 applies include offences under the criminal code or under any other law involving theft, fraud, dishonesty, and misappropriation of property, and including fraud and corruption. B, offences listed in the schedule of the rule and applications under the Process of Crimes Act 2005 or the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act 2005. You can see the list of fraud and offences types of offences and we have, and the schedule is there, shown in there. That is referring to the schedule in the criminal practice fraud and corruption related offences rules 2013. Those sections are referred to beside the offences types, the sections of the Criminal Code Act. Okay, the Code of Ethics. I'm just going to touch on the Code of Ethics in fraud and corruption registry in PNG. There is currently no Code of Ethics guiding the performance of the registry officers in discharging of the duties. Fraud and Corruption Registry operates under the common sense. approach which can be derived from other existing laws or regulations within the public service. The following can see as sources where code of ethics can be derived from is we have the Public Service Management Act and the NJSS admin orders, specifically part 5, order 112.7 to 12.19. And also we have the NJS's anti-corruption strategy that was just launched recently. So the NJS's anti-corruption strategy is an holistic way approach by NJS's PNG that places emphasis on agencies' wide conduct of code of conduct and the corruption complaints mechanisms or code of conduct. Going forward, it is preferably for the fraud and corruption track to have specific odds of affirmations instruments in place for all its officers in officers to subscribe to give the nature of offences we deal with daily. Okay. In conclusion, we have in Papua New Guinea, there are a lot of people who involve themselves in fraudulent and corrupt activities to enrich themselves. Those are caught and reported to police, have been prosecuted and dealt with according to law. Others who are not been caught or not been reported are out there enjoying their proceeds of crime. So the court is there to deal with perpetrators, but the court cannot go out to find out who is doing these illegal activities out there. Hence, the court needs the help of its important stakeholders like the police to carry out their work diligently to investigate and bring in evidence to hold those responsible liable. The onus is also on us, the citizens, the people of the country, PNG, to help by reporting such illegal practices to the police so that the perpetrators are arrested, brought to court, and are dealt with according to law. I believe NJSS of PNG is heading in the right directions, especially the recently launched anti-corruption strategy, which can provide a much needed platforms for fraud and corruption functions within the registry. Thank you, Margaret.
I might unmute myself and then you can hear me. Thank you very much for that, Victoria.